The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your servant, who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here immediately and take your place at table'? Would he not rather say to him, 'Prepare something for me to eat. Put on your apron and wait on me while I eat and drink. You may eat and drink when I am finished'? Is he grateful to that servant because he did what was commanded? So should it be with you. When you have done all you have been commanded, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Today, in our first reading, we heard from another of the 12 minor prophets. This time today from the prophet Habakkuk. I say Habakkuk. Mary said it right in Hebrew, the accent on the second syllable, Habakkuk. I say it the American way. As I mentioned last week, the minor prophets are not called minor because their message is of lesser significance, but simply because of the length of their writings. Their books tend to be very short. But among those 12 minor prophets, Habakkuk is an outlier. The other minor prophets generally proclaim warnings to the people of Israel, for example, in the form of oracles, like we heard last week from the prophet Amos, who began, "Woe, woe to the complacent." But Habakkuk is different. His prophecy is not so much about God's proclamation to the people, but rather the prophet's own struggles with God's actions. The question of theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people? And Habakkuk spends most of his book arguing with the Lord and saying, "Why are you allowing all this to happen?" Allowing what to happen? Well, like Amos, Habakkuk was a pious Jew who loved his nation and agonized as he watched his people destroy themselves through their sinful, decadent lives. He watched them ignore the warnings of all the other prophets who told them to repent or prepare yourself for the consequences. That's what we heard proclaimed this morning from that first reading. We hear Habakkuk's cry. He says, "How long, O Lord? I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene. Why do you let me see ruin? Why must I look at misery?" In other words, "Lord, why don't you do something about this? Look at the world around us. Why don't you do something about it? Why are you letting all this happen?" You know, that question I posed last week applies equally well for us today. When you listen to the words of the prophet, does any of it sound like it applies to our situation today? I think it does. This weekend, as you heard, our message is focused on two themes. For our first theme, again, the bishops of the United States designate the month of October as Respect Life Month, and today, the first Sunday of October, is known as Respect Life Sunday. The second theme that we are honoring is the image you see before us today, the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And those two themes are not unrelated. October is also dedicated to Our Lady of the Rosary, but I'll leave that one to the bishop when he comes on Friday. Like Habakkuk, we live in violent times. And sadly, there seems to be considerable confusion, even among people who ought to know better, regarding the clarity of the Church's teaching on the sanctity of human life, with some even claiming that these are complex ethical issues. Complex ethical issues. Confusion regarding the clarity of church teaching. I don't think so. I don't think so. From apostolic times, from the time of the apostles, the Catholic Church has always taught that every human life, from the moment of conception until natural death, is sacred. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states this very plainly and clearly. Let me quote it. It says, human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. There is no ambiguity or lack of clarity about this, nor is the issue complex. The Church's teaching on the sanctity of human life is simple and clear. God has revealed it, and it can never be changed. Again, from apostolic times, the Church has taught always and everywhere that human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. What's complicated about that? What's confusing about that? My wife has often commented to me that if we should make it to heaven, God is going to say to us, you people have made this so complicated. We have made it complicated. God makes it simple and clear. Respect for human life cannot mean treating the destruction, the deliberate destruction of the most vulnerable in society as one ethical issue among many. Abortion is the deliberate taking of innocent life, the life of a child in the womb, the most vulnerable and the most helpless person imaginable. And so abortion remains, and how always has been, the preeminent moral issue of our time. It is always intrinsically evil. There is no way to spin it, nor is there anything to discuss. There is no wiggle room here. It is always and everywhere wrong. You know, Habakkuk cried out to the Lord. He said, I cried out to you violence, but you do not intervene. Well, the Lord answered Habakkuk toward the end of that first reading. He says, for the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not be late. The rash one has no integrity, but the just one, because of his faith, shall live. The just one, because of his faith, shall live. What is faith? Well, you know, the letter to the Hebrews tells us that faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence for things not seen. As Catholics, we must stand firm in our faith. We must stand firm in the truth. The truth is not some complex issue, nor is it ever negotiable, because the truth is a person, and his name is Jesus Christ. As Jesus said to his apostle Thomas, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This is the foundational message of the gospel, and it's a message the Lord has entrusted to us, to you and me, to proclaim clearly and unequivocally. In his encyclical Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, Pope St. John Paul the Great began with the words, the gospel of life is at the heart of Jesus' message. Lovingly received day after day by the Church, it is to be preached with dauntless fidelity as good news to people of every age and culture. That good news is that of God's mercy, so beautifully captured in this image of the Sacred Heart that we see before us. A mercy that knows no limits whatsoever for those who turn to him. St. John Paul continued, he said, the right to life is the fundamental right, and yet, as part of contemporary culture, has wanted to deny that right, turning it into an uncomfortable right, one that has to be defended. But there is no other right that so closely affects the very existence of the human person. In other words, he's saying that the right to life, pro-life principles, are not a matter of religious belief even. They are fundamental moral norms of justice and human dignity, what we call natural law, that can be understood apart from any religion, any political ideology, any philosophical framework. You know, I find it so ironic that you cannot be a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew. You cannot be a Democrat or a Republican. You cannot be a capitalist or a socialist. You cannot be a climate change activist or a Gator or Seminole fan. You can't even be pro-life or pro-choice unless you are alive. The right to life is the most fundamental human right upon which all other rights depend. The right to life transcends all other human rights combined. Or, as St. Teresa of Calcutta put it, if abortion isn't wrong, then nothing is wrong. My friends, we have been given an even greater answer than the one that God gave to Habakkuk. And that answer is found in the one whose image we see before us today, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which symbolizes unconditional love and compassion for all, including the child in the womb, and including healing and forgiveness for anyone who may have participated in an abortion. So this image of the Sacred Heart, the heart is what's known as a universal archetype. In other words, regardless of one's culture or nationality or era, time in which you live. The heart is universally recognized as a symbol of love, compassion, and mercy. The Sacred Heart of Jesus reveals that his mercy and forgiveness knows no limits for those who place their faith and their trust in him. While the Lord said to Habakkuk, the just one because of his faith shall live, we heard Jesus in today's gospel say, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Now, I don't know about you, but the last time I commanded a tree to uproot itself, it did not obey me. So, either I don't have any faith whatsoever, or that's not what Jesus is saying. What Jesus is actually saying is, you don't need much faith. I can work with what you have. Just offer to me what little you have, because it's my power, not your power. It's not the size or amount of your faith that matters. It's the power of the one in whom you have that faith. And that's a very encouraging message. It's like those measly 5 loaves and 2 fish. Huh? What could they possibly do to feed thousands? But yet, surrender them, hand them over to Jesus, and watch what happens. Neither you nor I will personally solve the problem of abortion. Only God can do that. But he expects us to stand firm in the faith. It's again, as we heard Jesus say in today's gospel, when you have done all you have been commanded, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do. We are obliged to stand firm and keep the faith. For those of us, for those of you who have been doing that, keep it up. If not, start today. Today. If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. There's an old farmer's saying that goes, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Today. If you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. Today, let us be that tiny mustard seed we heard about in the gospel. Today, let us open our hearts to life and let God do the rest.